88.1 The Burg, your music central. My name is Nathan. Welcome back to What to Watch Weekends. That was slided in by Whitesnake, and what a wonderful song. So, for our first movie on the watch list this morning, we are going to be taking a look at Monty Python and the Holy Grail from 1975, available to watch on Netflix, although I'd personally recommend renting it off of somewhere, because I personally don't use Netflix. I don't really like the service at all. But that's neither here nor there, because we're here to talk about the movie, not about the streaming service. So, Monty Python and the Holy Grail's general story is it's about King Arthur. You know, the Arthurian legend, the one who pulled the sword from the stone, the one who met the lady in the lake, the one who found the Holy Grail. They basically take that story and they go, okay, we're going to do the one where he goes and finds the Holy Grail. But more specifically, we're going to come up with a bunch of random stuff that happens that prevents him from finding the Holy Grail over the course of this movie. And honestly, it gets weirder from there. So essentially, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is made by the British comedy troupe Monty Python, made up of people like John Cleese and a lot of other people who aren't John Cleese and aren't perfectly recognizable by name. But Terry Gilliam was a part of that troupe, which is why I like to talk about this movie when talking about Terry Gilliam, because he also directed it alongside Terry Jones, who I haven't looked into all that much, but I know for a fact that was his name, and I think it's funny that it was Terry and Terry who directed this movie. That's just goofy to me. But it really is kind of, if you want us to talk about like mainstream Terry Gilliam movies, Monty Python, like Holy Grail is really the best example of that, because it's the movie that I think a lot of people have heard of when they hear of Monty Python, they hear of Terry Gilliam, they hear of John Cleese, they think, oh yeah, that one, the one where they go to find the Holy Grail. And they don't find the Holy Grail and instead meet a black knight, and they meet the crazy knights who just say "ni" over and over again, and they meet the weird rabid rabbit who just destroys everybody. And it's a really funny movie. It's got this dry, sarcastic sense of humor where they basically make fun of King Arthur by making him incredibly incompetent the entire time. And they never actually do find the Holy Grail. It really just ends at it just cuts off because they ran out of budget, and so everybody gets arrested by the police. Yeah, that one. Honestly, I think the biggest point I want to bring up about Monty Python is a lot of people tend to quote it. They tend to go, oh, I love this movie, it's so funny. It's not like a timeless story. Like, yes, it is parodying the King Arthur legends, but like in the way of very clearly they don't care enough to do the research to like get things incredibly accurate, I guess. I I I don't want to go too far down that road because I'm not personally super familiar with the King Arthur legends, but it definitely, like, you don't have to be super familiar to tell, okay, there's at least a hint of like sarcasm and not caring, like this kind of ambivalence to the whole thing that kind of bleeds through the style of the movie enough to the point where you're like, okay, I don't know the legends all that much, but I'm pretty sure this isn't like parodying any aspect of the King Arthur legend. It's really just because they wanted to do something funny, which fair enough. But what I'm trying to say is I don't think that the man-eating rabbit is a parody off of anything from the King Arthur legends. I could be totally wrong, but it feels like such an out-of-pocket scene that they just like mess around with so much that I would be in disbelief if you told me that was parodying, like, oh, they ran into this monstrous beast in the pits of this crazy volcano. And it's like, okay, wait, no, what? You mean that they actually had an idea behind they put thought into the man-eating rabbit? It looks like they just took a stuffy and put it on a fishing line and threw it at people. Like, why would you put thought into that? But speaking of putting thought into things, what I'm really trying to get at is this movie doesn't necessarily, it has a core story. It has the bare bones of it. It's about King Arthur who assembles his merry band of misfits, the Knights of the Table or whatever. I forget if they called it Knights of the Round Table or they called it Knights of the Rectangular Table in this movie. I feel like they didn't go with the normal thing, but again, he assembles his knights and then they get told by God to go look for the Holy Grail. That's the overall plot of the thing, but in reality, there's a lot of stuff in between that happens, like little sketches here and there, and them running into like the Black Knight where they chop all his arms and legs off, and then like them running into the castle run by the French people, and then like trying to raid the castle and having a cow catapulted at them. There's so many random other things that kind of happen off to the side that it feels a lot more like a very elaborate movie-length sketch show where a lot of the sketches are intertwined with each other, but some of them are just so out of pocket and off the beaten path that it's like, okay, no, you're not like following a specific story here. You really just wanted to take a detour and do this random nonsense for the next 5 minutes, which I'm all here for, but it's not necessarily like exquisite storytelling. You can't study this movie's screenplay and learn how to tell a good story, is what I'm trying to say. But it's like the best. It's like it won't win awards for its story. It'll win awards for its comedy, its acting, its overall like presentation, its production quote unquote values. It just won't win awards for the screenplay, which nothing ever has to in the movie industry. But it's also like it's a bit lower than it won't win any awards to. There is just the bare minimum that you guys did. You did make it interesting, but it feels so close to the bare minimum that it's like, okay. It's this weird split of this weird dichotomy of I feel like you're trying, but I also know you're not trying, if that makes sense. It's why it feels a bit all over the place when I try to describe the story of this movie. And my favorite aspect about the Holy Grail is that fact. The fact that it feels like it has no story, because at the end of the day, this movie is just a glorified excuse for a bunch of morons to just bumble through the forest and talk in a British accent and pretend to be King Arthur and the Round Knights. Wow, Knights of the Round Table. It's just a good excuse to do that. And I can't fault it for it. I love this movie for these reasons that it is bad, honestly. Like, it's not ironic enjoyment, because if it was ironic enjoyment, I'd be making fun of it. I think part of it comes with the self-awareness of, yeah, no, we know that we're not trying here. We're not going to try, but we know we're doing it. We're not going to really take this seriously, but we know that we're doing it. And because of that, it feels almost intentional that the story is bad. It feels intentional that it's just weird and out there. And it's like, okay, you're trying to do something. Is it like a good storytelling moment? No. But you're trying to go in a certain direction and you're sticking to the bit, which that's really important in a comedy movie. And it's part of the reason why I find this movie so funny, why a lot of people find it funny, is just that a never-ending commitment to the bit really makes these like they really wanted to just stick to it, and props to that. I will also say that in terms of storytelling, it's bare bones. Again, I keep going on about its story. That's not the focus of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. But I will say I do like the adage of the concept they go with is, what are we going to do to prevent King Arthur from finding the Holy Grail? And the response was, random nonsense? Let's go with that. Cool. I guess I'm on board with that. Honestly, to really wrap up all of this bundle of seemingly disparate parts, what I will say is that I think, honestly, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is just so British that it becomes this sarcastic. I feel like a lot of this complaining and all of this like whining from me about its storyline and stuff like that, a lot of the reasons those things are the way they are is just because the movie is British. Honestly, like some British movies just tend to be so incredibly sarcastic and like not caring at all that it shows heavily in a movie like Monty Python that is like textbook definition of a British movie. So that's all I really have to say. Incredibly British. So put that on the DVD tag as like a a selling point, I guess. Incredibly British movie. It's going to be goofy like that. Okay, I've spent enough time talking about Monty Python and the Holy Grail. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about some other Terry Gilliam movies, namely 12 Monkeys from 1995. So stick around. 88.1 The Burg, your Music Central. Welcome back to What to Watch Weekends. My name is Nathan, and we are going to jump into the second movie on our watch list this morning. That being 12 Monkeys from 1995, another movie directed by Terry Gilliam. So, this movie is also available to rent on a lot of the renting platforms. Personally, I like to use, I don't like to use, but I tend to use the services either Redbox or Fandango at home. That's just my personal, experience. So, 12 Monkeys, 1998, is a movie about Bruce Willis, who is playing this character by the name of James Cole. In the far-off future of the 2030s, James Cole is imprisoned and is used by scientists as a guinea pig to go back in time and stop the apocalypse from happening, because this is 2030, and apparently there's been this outbreak of a rare virus that has basically caused the world to go into absolute chaos. Wonderful. So, to kind of also preface this movie a little bit, I'd like to say I didn't fully know it, but I kind of, during research, figured out, I read that this movie is based on a short film called La Jetée, or Jetty. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it because it's French, and French pronunciations is always annoying, but La Jetée, which is kind of the precursor to 12 Monkeys, is a French short film about a man who travels back in time during World War II. And apparently, the movie is made up entirely of still photographs of the time and him, going back in time to some point before World War II in order to stop it. I didn't read the super detailed description because when you have a couple keywords in it, I tend to maybe tune out, and some of the general population would tend to tune out as well, because it sounds like a bit of a pretentious art film. Namely, it's a French movie. It's not all in black and white, but told all through black and white still photographs set during World War II. That combination there, none of these elements on their own is a bad thing, but put together, it just screams pretentious short film. And specifically the usage of still photographs. And so really, the big question I'd like to ask, for those of you listening in, I'd really like to have your responses. If you could text in your response while I ask you this question: would you rather watch a possibly very stuck-up 26-minute French short film about a real event in history using just still photographs of World War II in order to communicate this point of traveling back in time that was made a while ago, and will probably just preach to you over and over again in a non-subtle way at all? Or would you watch B, a hallucinatory British fever dream starring Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt as they live in the apocalypse and basically go crazy while Bruce Willis is constantly time traveling? Which one would you rather watch? I'm being honest here. There's no shame in wanting to watch the French one, but personally, I'd rather go with The Acid Trip, directed by Terry Gilliam, starring Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt in it, quite honestly, because of the fact that it doesn't feel pretentious. It feels goofy and out there and weird to experience. And, no shame if you want to watch the thing that it's based off of before watching 12 Monkeys. But I haven't seen it yet. I was even considering, should I watch it? And I was like, this description just makes me think that it's gonna be pretentious, and I don't have time to watch a pretentious movie, even if it's 26 minutes long. I could make time, but I have other stuff I want to do right now, and I'd have to be in a mood of I have nothing better to do to watch a pretentious short film made by a French person about World War II. Okay, that's the long and short of it. And again, I would watch it, and I'm sure it's worth a watch. And no shame if you want to. It's just that I personally really prefer watching 12 Monkeys over that. And so that's just something worth bringing up, even though it's based off of it. I'm confident in saying that there was at least a mild improvement, or at least a different direction that Terry Gilliam went in when deciding to take elements from Leggetti and making 12 Monkeys. Now, of course, he didn't write the film, but I mean, it's Terry Gilliam's style, his like weird sort of tilted fever dream state of making a movie definitely helped it stand out in comparison to what it was based off of, which was just still photographs. Anything's better than still photographs in movie making, to be completely honest with you. And I mean like exclusively still photographs. I like using them, but it's like it's also like if it's just that and it sounded like it was, then what's the point of it being a movie at that point? That I don't want to get too caught up on it, because there's bigger fish to fry when talking about 12 Monkeys. That, first of all, in comparison to Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which I went on and on about having not necessarily a perfect story, 12 Monkeys legitimately has a good plot twist to it. During the course of the movie, Brad Pitt's character is this person, he's like locked in a mental hospital, constantly wandering around and like waxing philosophical and weirding Bruce Willis out. And he's like, he seems kind of insignificant for most of it. By the end of the movie, it's revealed that he was the one who actually releases the plague on the world, because he releases these monkeys from the zoo. See, the title 12 Monkeys, it's like the army of the 12 monkeys is what caused the world to end. What Brad Pitt does is that he releases the monkeys from the zoo, and they go out and infect people. See, monkeys from the zoo, 12 monkeys, army of the 12 monkeys. That's where the name comes from, and I know that's a spoiler. It's a significant spoiler. But I will say, that's not really the biggest twist in this entire story. Believe me, Brad Pitt's character is so much more than just the one who caused the apocalypse. And it seems like, well, what do you mean? He caused the apocalypse. That's the whole point of the movie. It's about like preventing the apocalypse. And basically we're told that they don't prevent the apocalypse. It still ends up happening, and Bruce Willis fails at his goal. Yes, that is essentially what happens. But I will tell you right now, it somehow, because you've been following Bruce Willis the entire time, Brad Pitt's character's relation to Bruce Willis's character goes so much deeper than you caused the world to end. I'm not going to tell you exactly what that connection is. It is like worth watching play out. It really is. And as much as I'd love to spoil it, I also don't want to. I legitimately think it's like a perfect example of how you take a time travel story and make it have a significant ending. Like, you have to have that twist to it of going, okay, what does this mean? Or like, you think it's going to go one way and then you go, oh no, this is where it's going. It has that element to it, and that's how you make a time travel story work. You have to kind of wrap your head around it, and you may have to like read up on some stuff to actually figure out what it's like saying, or what it actually means, or just the overall feel, like a good explanation of what the ending means. But once you get that in your head, you go, okay, that makes it so much more significant. That means that like they didn't just throw in the time travel just for the sake of it, and they had like a storytelling reason to go with it. So good on them. I honestly don't want to say exactly how significant it is, but again, just keep in mind, Brad Pitt's character is somehow more significant in terms of he's not just the guy who caused the apocalypse. He causes something else in the overall core of the story. So cool beans on that one. I will also say about 12 Monkeys that 12 Monkeys was a movie directed by Terry Gilliam, and I believe it was like a co-production between Britain and America. I didn't look into that perfectly. What I do know is that Sci-Fi, the American network company, the TV network, Sci-Fi, you know, the people who made Sharknado. Yeah, those people. They essentially went out of their way to make a 12 Monkeys TV show that was not directed by Terry Gilliam, did not involve Terry Gilliam, did not involve the guys who wrote the original movie, and was completely American. As I said, Terry Gilliam is British, and so it's like they just completely cut out any relation to Terry Gilliam's style or him at all, and we're just like, we can remake the movie into a TV show. Watch us do it. I know that it exists. That's about as far as I'm gonna go, because I am so sick of this kind of thing happening. This sentiment comes from the fact that like I've heard that they're apparently going to be making the movie Parasite from 2019, directed by Bong Joon-ho. They're going to be making the movie Parasite into a TV show here in America, and I got so mad when I heard that. America needs to stop taking properties from everywhere else and thinking that they can do better. They can't. I don't care. Nobody can do better. None of them. And it's not even like it's just Hollywood. It's just America in general needs to stop doing this. They need to start hiring people who know how to come up with new ideas and just overall making it work. And I will say there are certain exceptions. For example, the movie The Departed, directed by Martin Scorsese, it's mostly pretty heavily adapted from the I don't remember if it's Korean or Japanese. Here, I'm going to look it up. It's essentially adapting the story of Infernal Affairs, which is a police drama. And hold up. Hong Kong. So the Hong Kong movie, Infernal Affairs, was adapted into the movie The Departed, directed by Martin Scorsese. And they basically took a foreign idea and brought it into America. And they put in like Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack Nicholson. That kind of thing, it's not like perfect, but it's also not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that America should not be making a show called 12 Monkeys. If it's like adapting it into something with a new name and a different identity with American actors and kind of focused on telling a mildly different story, or telling the same story but in a different way, or just not calling it what it was called in like whatever foreign country it's from, then it's completely fine. My problem, again, with the 12 Monkeys TV show, with the Parasite TV show, is that they called them 12 Monkeys, and they're probably going to call it Parasite. They're going to intentionally imply that there's some connection between this inferior version compared to its foreign counterpart. And that is where I draw the line, because you could easily just adapt it for America. You don't need to call it the same thing. You can say it's based off of something. And here's where the real crux of my complaint comes from. 12 Monkeys did exactly that. They did it the right way. They took the French movie La Jetée, which was only about a 26-minute short film about World War II, and they adapted it into a weird future, like, dystopian movie with time travel in it. It's almost like you can't compare A to B in that instance, because one is a possibly pretentious French short film in black and white about World War II with still photographs. 12 Monkeys is a 1990 movie with Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt, and is directed by Terry Gilliam, and it feels like an absolute fever dream, where it's set in the weird dystopian future, and they travel back and, like, you see, and it's also like a feature-length movie. How did you extrapolate the entire story of La Jetée and turn it into a feature-length movie? I'll tell you how they extrapolated that. By adding their own stuff to the story. That's how you do it. That's how you can't just like take the entire essence of it, pull it, and go, this is ours, and it's related to this thing. No, it didn't work with Godzilla. Okay, it didn't work with Godzilla, except for when it did in 2014. Okay, but we don't talk about the 1998 version of Godzilla. We don't talk about that one. That's how it failed. Okay, it can fail just because it's worked maybe like once. Doesn't mean you should keep doing it. Stop. please, I beg you, leave things be. Not everything has to be a sequel. Not everything has to be a remake. Anyways, that's my tirade for the morning. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to jump into the movie Time Bandits. 88.1 The Burg, your Music Central. My name is Nathan. Welcome back to What to Watch Weekends. For our third movie on the watch list this morning, we are going to be taking a look at the movie Time Bandits from 1981, available to watch on Max. So, this entire sort of tirade this morning has been about Terry Gilliam movies, and Time Bandits, I believe, was, well, no. The first Terry Gilliam movie I watched was Monty Python and the Holy Grail. But this was around the time, I believe, that I started watching a lot more movies. And when I watched Time Bandits, I kind of figured out that it was directed by Terry Gilliam and realized, hey, this guy has an interesting style to him. So, let's just jump into it. Time Bandits is about a child by the name of Kevin, who has parents who do not care about him. He's a young history buff, and they're more distracted by their modern TV set and their TV dinners than actually talking to their own child about history. It's very sad. Late at night while in bed, he is given a call to action as 6 random dwarves show up in his house, drag him out, and take him on a crazy adventure where they travel through time, meeting a bunch of historical figures. And the way they do that is by traveling around with a map that they stole from their boss, who is essentially God. Okay. That's a normal plot for a movie. That's a very normal plot for a movie. I will say, as funny as it sounds, and as goofy and out there as this movie probably seems to be, I will honestly admit that Time Bandits isn't really a laugh out loud kind of movie. It's a lot more of a sharp parody mixed with like a lot of dry sort of dry comedy that doesn't exactly make you laugh, but you just go, okay, that's kind of funny. Like, they're making fun of stuff, and they're very clearly just like they're taking a very, I guess, removed stance on everything, and they seem a bit aloof and sarcastic about a lot of stuff happening right now. Okay, fair enough. It did make it kind of, the reason I bring this up is because when I watched this movie for the first time, I liked it and I thought it was funny, but I wasn't like laughing. And then when watching it with a friend, he was like not fully into it, and I was like, oh, you sure? And then as it went on, I kind of realized, no, it's not like a funny kind of movie that you can really make fun of. It's just like a fairly decent movie with a lot of dry moments and a lot of sarcasm just embedded into the DNA of it. So it just doesn't make it a perfect viewing experience when you're trying to watch a silly, goofy, laugh out loud movie with your friends. So that's really it's kind of a criticism, but it's like I don't think they were trying to do that. Again, Terry Gilliam is just more focused on being weird than he is on being funny, honestly. What with 12 Monkeys being this crazy fever dream about traveling back in time and having Brad Pitt play a mental patient, I think he really is more focused on being crazy than he is on being funny. And that's part of the reason that I appreciate him as a director. So I'm going to give it a pass. I will also say that in order to sell you on this movie, I will tell you right now, this movie has Sean Connery and John Cleese in it. They play King Agamemnon. That's how you pronounce that name. I never know how to pronounce it. King Agamemnon. That was wrong. Whatever. That's who Sean Connery plays, and John Cleese plays Robin Hood. They were not the reason that I watched the movie, I don't think. I saw their names in the credits, and I was like, okay, cool. Now that I think of it, I may have actually watched the movie because I saw their name in the credits. So, they are the reason I watched the movie. But I'll say, if you know who Sean Connery or John Cleese is, they don't play a significant role, but it is funny to watch it just to see them show up. I do remember Robin Hood a lot clearer than King agmorphic, whatever his name is. I remember John Cleese's performance a lot more than Sean Connery, which is partially because I just didn't. This was like a while ago before I really knew who Sean Connery was. So when he showed up, I was like, "Oh, that's the king." Cool. To be fair, as well, I believe King Agamemnon is when it's like in ancient Greece, and that is kind of when the movie really slows down because Kevin essentially escapes from the dwarves that he's been traveling with the entire movie, and they kind of just leave him there, and he just kind of wanders around and tries to be happy because the movie isn't really like a normal kids movie where this kind of thing happens. It's not really about the wonders of adventuring out into the unknown and like exploring new things and learning a lot of valuable life lessons. This movie is really like, it's really just about Kevin reacting to the things he sees and kind of learning that life is not fair and things aren't what they seem, which isn't it's not really like a kids movie concept all that much. They tend to say like, oh, the world is fine and you should really make sure to share with people. For context, this movie's like rated PG and it came out in the 80s, and it has like a young boy going through a magical adventure with these six dwarves going to different periods in history because he's a history buff, and like it sounds like a textbook children's movie until you watch it and you go, it's not really for kids. It's a lot more cynical than I think a child would be able to comprehend. And it's a bit too weird to be like fully understood. It's kind of abstract, and it's like what it's trying to do. It's really just trying to be random and goofy and just like make fun of everything, a lot like Monty Python. And because of that, it's not like a really children's film, even though it has the structure of being a children's film. So, okay, it just fits into this very weird middle ground. I will also say that almost obviously, I have a very weird place in my heart for Time Bandits because I don't love the movie. Like when I say it's a weird place in my heart, I mean it's weird in the fact that it's in my heart, but I don't love it. You know, that's an interesting concept. But follow me here. I don't think I love it. I don't think it's like a masterpiece. But I will admit that I like it for its like ability to be creative. They clearly put a lot of time and effort into thinking certain things out, like how the set was going to look and how they would design the dwarves. Like each dwarf is very significantly different visually, even though they don't really have like character arcs or anything like that. And Kevin's just kind of there the entire time, and he does sort of grow a little bit, but he more so grows to learn that like people aren't always going to follow you and that the world isn't really fair to you anymore. And they do fight this big evil guy and they have this confrontation. But then the boss of the dwarves shows up and he just kind of goes, Kevin, the world isn't going to be nice to you like this. I'm sorry, kid. I'm just going to take my map back from my dwarves. They're going to come back to work for me. And you're just going to go home. Bye. It all feels like something that Monty Python would put together, you know, and it's not surprising considering that Terry Gilliam was a part of Monty Python and part of directing the Holy Grail. So it's on brand is really what I'm getting at. It's Time Bandits is on brand for the style of Monty Python. I also will say, as I've mentioned a couple times, the dwarves are essentially running away from their boss throughout most of the movie. They've stolen his magic map that allows them to travel through time, and this boss is like basically just God. He's like the creator of everything, and he's like this ultra powerful being, and of course, when he's eventually revealed, he's just this upstanding British dude who's taller than all the dwarves in a nice suit. Because of course that's again on brand for Monty Python. Moving on from that aspect of it, I will say right now, the name of this character is not God. I'm saying he's essentially God because that's his like place his role in the story and the way the character is sort of portrayed to be. In reality, he actually has a name, and the name is the Supreme Being, which is a cool enough name for a godlike character. But it's also significant to me because when I was making my first short film, or making a short film that I was going to write and direct, kind of my debut, I made it about these two guys who travel through different alternate universes and eventually meet this godlike figure. And you know what I named him? I named him the Supreme Being. I unintentionally stole the name from Time Bandits to call the godlike character in my first short film. And because of that, I can't really fault Time Bandits for too much stuff. I can't say that it's a movie I didn't take something away from, something I didn't hold on to. That's why I say it has such a weird place in my heart, because I subconsciously and unintentionally stole that name from somewhere. And I'm willing to bet that it came from Time Bandits. Like, there's a good chance that if that happened, it was like unintentional, but it happened because of Time Bandits is what I'm trying to get at. Like, I think it wasn't intentionally me stealing it. It was more so, okay, I remember someone called their god character the Supreme Being. I want to use that name for this character. And so I can't write off Time Bandits just because of that. I have to acknowledge where I came from and where I got my ideas from. And it's not like I was consciously stealing it. It's more so that it's just kind of a funny coincidence that I found out while doing some research. So, wonderful. Anyways, just goes to show, when you watch enough movies and you want to make them, eventually you're going to take ideas from them and you're going to be inspired. I mean, watching movies tends to inspire people to make movies. You don't get the idea to make movies from, I don't know, reading a book. Well, you could. I'm not gonna get too far down that rabbit hole. At any point, I think I'd recommend Time Bandits if you're looking for something a little more creative, but just not incredibly funny. If you want to see something just a little weird and a little off the beaten path, then I'd highly recommend watching Time Bandits. Available to watch on Max or HBO Max or whatever they should have called it. The point is, I'd recommend it. I feel like it's worth the watch. So we are going to take another break. When we come back, we are going to end this morning's watch list with the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your music central. My name is Nathan. Welcome back to What to Watch Weekends. For our fourth and final movie on the watch list this morning, we are going to be taking a look at the 1998 movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, available to rent. Directed, again, by Terry Gilliam. So, this movie follows Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro playing two characters by the name of Raoul Duke and Dr. Gonzo as they travel to Las Vegas to cover the Mint 400, with Raoul Duke being a journalist and Dr. Gonzo being his attorney. They load up on a bunch of substances and end up going on an actual trip through the middle of Las Vegas. This is where I need to stop and say that this movie was adapted from the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. And here's where I really need to grind the brakes, because I got a crazy story to tell all of you today. Let me tell you right now, Hunter S. Thompson is such a weird person in and of himself. He's basically a living cartoon character. Like, imagine the, pure insanity of a person who was around during the acid wave and essentially pioneered an entirely new style of newspaper journalism. That's how, crazy this person was, and that's, the tame version of it, okay? Keep that in mind. The book is incredibly special, as instead of being this fictional story about two characters going to Las Vegas, it's instead a mix between real life and overall kind of fictional storytelling, this weird, subjective look at everything through the eyes of the author in the form of a newspaper article, rather than being a newspaper article about a dirt bike race where someone goes, here's who won the race, here's what happened, here's who was in the lead for a little while, and here's all this. They basically, instead, Hunter S. Thompson went, let's tell it like this. I went to the hotel. Here's my feelings about everything having to do with America in the 1970s. Here's what happened when we got to our hotel. We loaded up on a bunch of stuff and met our crazy photographer. And here's what I think of American politics in the 1970s. That's not necessarily normal for journalism. And because of that, Hunter S. Thompson was known as the father of gonzo journalism, this incredibly weird style of journalism where instead of covering the event, it's really just all from the perspective of the person writing the article. And I will say, this is overall, like, it starts off with them covering the Mint 400. It's this, like, annual race held in Nevada. But, like, you don't know who wins the race. That's not the focus of it. It's really about the journey to get there. And it's important to bring up that event because it was like a real thing that happened. It definitely still is happening this year. I don't remember exactly when it is, but it's important to note that Hunter S. Thompson, the man who wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, is actually telling it from a very personal point of view because he did in fact go to cover the Mint 400 race. He went to the race to write this, just a photo caption for Sports Illustrated. All he was supposed to do was write a little caption for a picture they'd take during the race and go, here's these racers and here's which one of them ended up winning. The story, what he eventually turned into his publisher, was this weird long ramble about him and his friend, like Oscar Acosta, this Mexican attorney, I believe. He was still an attorney in real life as well, getting incredibly buzzed up on a lot of different substances, trekking through the middle of the desert and all throughout Las Vegas, trying to find the American dream. And then he went back to Vegas after he like wrote that entire rambling nonsense in order to cover an anti-drug commission, and the adventure started all over again. They loaded up on a bunch of stuff, and it was incredibly ironic because they were going to cover an anti-drug seminar, and they're still incredibly buzzed out of their mind. And so Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is the meshing of those two accounts. One of them is from the Mint 400, and a couple weeks later they get sent to the seminar, and there's an account very similar, like still in the same style, that they then meshed together and turned into a book rather than publishing it as a photo caption. Could you imagine flipping through Sports Illustrated and seeing the picture of dirt bikes and just reading this entire paragraph about how the guy who wrote the caption went to Las Vegas, buzzed with his attorney, and they basically got caught up in an entirely different idea of trying to find the American dream? Can you imagine that? I can imagine that, and it's really funny. Now, keep in mind that I've mentioned that Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro are playing the two characters, Raul Duke and Dr. Gonzo. It's very true, but it's also like these are basically the sort of cover names for Hunter S. Thompson and Oscar Acosta, respectively being Raul Duke and Dr. Gonzo. Dr. Gonzo comes from the name Gonzo journalism, which is the style of journalism that Hunter S. Thompson was basically inventing when he made Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And it's also important to note that Gonzo journalism is not news at all. It's not a news story. Again, very subjective point of view with a lot of swearing and a lot of just overall, here's the horrible things we did, here's all the substances we were using, and here's what I think of America right now. Also a lot of like satire and just overall stream of consciousness writing without really stopping, not really taking breaks, just going and going and going. I haven't had enough time in my life to read the entirety of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but I have read like at least the first couple pages, and I can tell you right now that there's a very weird, like, the way they tell the story is we see this guy, he's going, oh, I see this guy on the side of the road. And then he starts talking about his opinions. I'm talking about Hunter S. Thompson. Basically says, we saw this guy on the side of the road. Here's my opinions on America. Here's what I'm experiencing at this current moment. He was in the back of the car. And I go, when did he get into the back of the car? You didn't tell us that he got into the back of the car. You literally just jumped ahead. Now he's in the car? Okay, you're very clearly more focused on your own feelings right now than you are on, like, kind of blocking this all out so I can picture it in my mind. I have to kind of struggle to keep up with you right now. And keep in mind, I've only read the first couple pages. If it's that confusing and weird and just out there as a piece of writing can be from the first couple of pages, it's a wild ride throughout the entire thing. I'm sorry. And according to Hunter S. Thompson, it's not even like a pure work of gonzo journalism to him because it was edited. If the book had not, like, if the story itself, if what he'd turned in had never been looked over and never had certain details changed to it, it would have been pure gonzo journalism. I can only imagine how incomprehensible and nonsensical it would have been in comparison to how incomprehensible and nonsensical it is now. Now, all of that is really to say, I know it seems like I'm kind of going off on the book itself when this is What to Watch Wednesdays. Let me tell you right now, there is such a weird... This is what makes Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the movie, such an interesting thing to talk about. Because objectively speaking, the movie isn't good in terms of being a story. It doesn't really have progression. The characters don't learn. They're just constantly horrible because they're always buzzed out of their minds, and they don't really learn anything except that the American dream is a lie. But that's such an abstract concept to cover in a movie that you can't really get away with saying that's the point of it. And really the biggest strength is the fact that they use just a bunch of acid rock and the camera movements are really cool. But other than that, it's just this weird fever dream of a movie that never really seems to go anywhere, never seems to start anywhere, and doesn't really say anything at all. And it's just Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro doing a bunch of weird stuff. I would like to say right now that Johnny Depp basically took a lot of inspiration from Hunter S. Thompson while playing the character of Raoul Duke, as in, like, he borrowed clothes from Hunter S. Thompson and learned his mannerisms in order to play the character that Hunter S. Thompson basically wrote into the story based on himself. So essentially I blame this movie for the reason that Johnny Depp is just such a weirdo and why he managed to play Jack Sparrow. Like, Jack Sparrow would not exist without Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, honestly. And like I said, there's no story. It's just cool camera movements. It's more interesting to talk about where the story itself came from and the book it's based off of. And the movie itself is just this weird, incoherent garble of what on earth is happening and why do they still keep loading up on crazy stuff. Could you guys just calm down a little bit, please? It's got that feeling to it. And yet, as a movie itself, I objectively consider it to be like middle of the road. It's not a good movie. I love Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the movie, and it's part of the reason why I've even read a couple pages of the book in the first place, because I wanted to read the book and get an idea for how the story really came to be and how they adapted it, because a weird stream of consciousness, subjective look at journalism is not a perfect way to structure a movie. How do you do that in a way that actually works? And honestly, I feel like this movie did as best as it possibly could to really emulate that. It's not that the movie itself just doesn't, it's not that the story for the movie itself just doesn't work. It's straight up that as a book, it was already breaking a lot of conventions. And so, and as a news article, it was breaking a lot of conventions. So to turn that into a movie, you have to really strain to get it to work. And I can't really fault them for not making it work. All I can say is just, it didn't work. Experiment failed, but good job for trying, because what did end up happening was you made a very crazy and weird movie. So that's worth celebrating to me. Again, I love Terry Gilliam just because he's weird. I don't love his movies because they're all masterpieces or amazing works of cinema. I love them because they're weird and they're out there and you don't know what's going to happen next and you're constantly on the edge of your seat, thinking, what's the next weird thing that's going to pop up into this movie that I'm watching with my eyes right now? Who knows? I could be watching it with my feet and you could never tell because because everything gets turned upside down. Everything becomes so sarcastic, weird, and feverish that you don't know left from right anymore. And that's the beauty of cinema, honestly, that you can watch a movie like that and still come out the other end saying, I liked whatever that was. Emblematic of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, emblematic of Monty Python, of 12 Monkeys even, and even like Time Bandits. Just the overall style of Terry Gilliam has never been replicated because there really is only one Terry Gilliam. And I just love him for that. You can't do better than the original, and honestly, I would... It's just so beautiful to see weirdness still exist in the world today. Have fun. Don't worry about it. I get off track with this kind of thing, but I will admit I really do enjoy Terry Gilliam, and I'm glad that he hasn't passed away yet. There was a big joke a couple of years ago that people said he was dead, but he wasn't. People just thought he was. So here's to you, Terry Gilliam. Hopefully you don't die yet. Yeah, that's a good wish. I'm going to stop. Thank you all for listening in to What to Watch Weekends. My name is Nathan. I will be back here on 88.1 The Burg on Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m. For What to Watch Wednesdays, and then next Saturday at 9 a.m. here for What to Watch Weekends. Thank you all for tuning in, and we are going to close out with Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones, a song that could have been played in the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but they didn't have enough money to do it.